Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. Also goes out on my YouTube channel and the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page and more. So lots of places that you can view and like and share and subscribe and all of those good things. This is year 8 of Wednesdays with Willa podcast. So you have a treasure trove of past episodes that you can access in the archive videos, especially on my YouTube channel. And so wonderful conversation that I have with special guests relating to either spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And people tell me all the time that they binge watch the show and that they really feel that beautiful connection between me and the guests. And it's just beautiful to know that we're able to help them understand another aspect of their spiritual life and journey. And today I'm thrilled to invite back onto the show Dr. Christopher Kerr. He's here today. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're so grateful that you're going to be here again for the upcoming summer season of 2025 here at Lilydale. You're going to be here opening day with your workshops to talk about end of life visions. And for those of you who don't know who Dr. Christopher Kerr is, he is the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Executive Officer of Hospice and Palliative Care in Buffalo, New York. And he and his research team have been studying hospice patients and their end of life visions and the healing power that is very much part of that special phase in a person's life. And I love the fact that you've been able to get the word out, not only in your TED Talk, but also in your wonderful book. And that book is Death is But a Dream, which is such a great title. And I encourage people to take a look at that book. I was rereading the book recently, and I was really uplifted by the true stories that are represented in that book of Dr. Christopher Kerr's patients and all of your insightful remarks about those end of life journeys and how they're able to really find peace before their passing. So it's one of the exciting things when you're here in Lilydale, opening day, which is June 20th. You'll be here in the auditorium to talk about death is but a dream and a lot of
Yeah.
those insights. But we'll give people something to take away today with them that helps them to understand uh, this end of life vision. So many people fear death, they don't understand death. And here you are with a very special group of people that help to facilitate people to that end in the most peaceful way possible. So, yes, I'm so excited that you're here.
No, thank you for having me.
Yes. So, how about we first, if you want to share with people a little bit about your work that you do with Hospice Buffalo, just to center them in about that, we can get on into the healing power of end of life visions.
Sure. So about our organization and our and what
Yes,
we do here,
please.
yeah, we're a pretty special place. We're one of the pioneering hospices in the country, and we arose before there was a benefit. This just came out of the community who saw a great need. So that sense of belonging to this community as a resource has always been there. We care for about 1,100, 1,200 patients a day, 450 employees, and we have the first inpatient unit in the country and the first campus in the country. We also have a program for kids. We're both hospice and then upstream palliative care as well. So we do a little bit of both. Most of our patients are at home and in the care of their family.
Yes, and hospice in and of itself is such an important service to provide to people. Served as a hospice volunteer for a number of years, and it was a quiet joy to go in and help people in their homes. Sometimes I'd go visit them in a nursing home or in a hospital, and just depending on where I was assigned to either give respite to the caregivers, to the family, or also just give them a pleasant voice and pleasant face to connect with while they were in that process, so that they're not alone.
Wonderful you did that.
Yeah, I think it's if people can do that and put that into a place in their lives, it gives back to them way more than they ever have to give out.
Kind of an interesting thing, the when they design the benefit of hospice, volunteers are mandated. So it's great because you always have community representation and just people taking care, helping to take care of others outside of a medical model, which is wonderful.
Yes, and
So yeah,
I mean, as wonderful it is to have a doctor and have a nurse and have a social worker and all of those
yeah.
things.
And
There's
dying's lonely, and people just benefit from presence, right? So it's yeah.
Yeah, a great place to learn about yourself and to learn about spiritual things too. I really look back on that time as a hospice volunteer and how much I learned about connecting with a person's soul, even if they couldn't speak to me verbally,
Mhm.
that there was that understanding and that gentleness that
Yeah,
could happen through those moments. So I give you so much credit for heading up a
well,
very special organization. So thank you.
my privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that role, you're not just trying to serve as a doctor, like the head over the organization, but you're also at the same time leading research teams that are really working hand in hand with hospice patients so that their end of life visions can be recorded. Uh, how about we tell people about that experience? So, when you decided to go ahead and let research teams come in and how you got navigated that territory with hospice patients and their families.
Yeah, none of it was intentional. Um, and I was just working here part time when I was a cardiology fellow in 1999, so a long time ago. And I wasn't here very long, and it was really my colleagues in nursing, social work, pastoral care, volunteers who um, made it clear that there was kind of the dying that I thought I observed and understood. And there was this other dimension to it, which was the patient's experience. The parts that I couldn't see or measure, or and that there was something to be learned from that. Excuse me. And what eventually happened was the, the nurses, particularly by paying attention to what the patients were experiencing, were able to prognosticate. They could predict where somebody was at. For example, if they were seeing a deceased loved one. And so I didn't understand it, but I gradually grew to have a reverence for it. And then what happened was I was trying to teach young doctors. And we live in this evidence-based time. And it was very hard to impress upon them that, there's more than what we see here. And that basically what you believe is not relevant, it's what the patient's experiencing that matters, right?
Yeah.
And and so it was always met with you know skepticism, and they particularly would tend to think, well, these people have confused or broken minds. And so that started, the research was done basically to provide evidence, which was kind of a shame because it's always been talked about throughout time and across cultures, but it need to be put kind of in doctor speak for it to have any validity. And what was interesting is, so we'd started doing studies on this just to prove a point, so that it would have some relevance clinically. So it would be validated. That's how we started it. And it really didn't reach so much the medical audience, but it creeped out into the popular press. And it went, New York Times, Washington Post, and it went around the world. And which is very telling because there's a clear disconnect between how the clinical world views this and yet how the people who are experiencing, witnessing, or contemplating their own mortality view this stuff. So
Mhm.
that's how it happened. It was never done with the intention of a larger audience, but it just got, which is very telling because I think people don't want a medicalized version necessarily of end of life.
True.
So that's how it happened.
Yeah. It's really amazing. It goes beyond the box that people want to put it in. And
Yeah,
yet at the same time, you were trying to offer a compassionate roadmap to
yeah,
medical professionals and care professionals so that they could better support families and individuals that were going through
yeah,
these things. So I do feel that there is that bigger energy essence behind it of trying to bring through the research that compassion, and hopefully it's reached some of them in that way. But I think that's why it's resonated so deeply with others, because they say yes, of course, and those things are like home truths to an individual as a soul, not
yeah.
just a,
That,
a wishful thinking. It's a home
that's a
truth
great,
when you feel it.
yeah, that's a great description. Yeah, it's always fascinates me. So there's literally nothing new. Like we didn't discover anything, right? It's always been known. We just put a different frame on the picture. But whenever it's published, it was in the New York Times again this last spring. Whenever it's published, you should see the number of responses. It usually gets more responses than anything else in that week or month or whatever. And what people are responding to is they identify with it because they've had experiences. And it may not have been recognized or it may even be dismissed. So
Yes.
there's this sense of being validated. And so what you tend to have happen is, I kind of tell a story of our work, and then immediately people start offering their own what they witnessed in their life. So it's really
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Well, there is a shared experience when you've had to walk with someone who, when I say walk with, I mean be hand in hand with someone as they're walking toward the end of physical life, and the energy that a bond that can be established in those times. It's very special. I think back to my own experiences with that. I started to become as close to them as if they were my parents or grandparents. I felt that kind of intense love for them as souls as they were working their way through that, and being able to hold space for them without having had any of the triggers of past events with them.
Yeah.
That was easier for me. But for those that are family members that are watching someone go through these experiences, it's good if they have the help of folks in hospice to tell them it's okay that you sit with them. It's okay that you talk with them. It's okay that they may not be speaking as clearly as you think they should. But if you really listen deeply to the other experiences they're sharing, you start to see the magic
Yeah. I mean,
of
you
those
described it
moments.
perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, one of our jobs, I feel, is to narrow the distance at the bedside. So people who are witnessing and they're used to seeing this loved one who they've known their whole lives, perhaps, and they look different and they sound different. And you're grief stricken and confused and disoriented and all that. And normalizing, translating what is being observed is so very helpful. I had a experience one time where a lot of people resort to their native language, and
Yes.
there was an older woman lying in a bed, and she's speaking in Polish, and her daughter is sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, discomforted, and the assumption is this is medication or whatever, and um, so she was not okay. Then when it was explained to her, no, no, this is really more common than not, and that overwhelmingly comforting, and often reflective on life, etc. And the next day I came in and she's sitting at the bedside making notes because she's hearing her mother relive the most important moments of her life. So she's hearing about her pets as a kid, her grandparents, her friends. This is in Europe, and so death gets inverted then.
Yes.
And then there isn't the fear of death, but really the validation of a life that was led. And we've measured this interbereavement. It has enormous consequences. So, yeah.
So it's healing for the family members, the caregivers, and also for the individuals that are about to get into that boat and go to the other side. I see this painting behind you of the boat
Oh,
and
yeah.
the individual with the oars out, and it's such a great symbol
Mhm.
for entering into that journey to the next. And it's right
Yeah.
there on your wall behind you.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's actually
great.
funny. When we did our first study, we had a menu list and we asked people what they were dreaming of. And travel is a component in almost a third. And we've seen every form of travel, planes, boats, and usually somebody's with them, accompanying them, and whatnot. So there's always this metaphor
Yes.
of transition or travel. Yeah.
And I guess we should point out to that because I'm so glad you brought that up. We should point out to them that when you've done this research, this is video, you have videographers, right, that are doing, that
Often,
are,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that once a person is having an end of life vision, which we will better define in just a moment, that then this is stated to the camera, as it were.
Yeah, we have filmed a lot over the years, and the reason we did that was because originally we were thinking that particularly the medical community would be suspicious that these patients were again had altered cognition, and of course, when you actually talk to them, they actually have heightened awareness, introspection, reflection, etc. So
Yes.
that's we filmed it for that purpose. And it's funny because then it ended up in several documentaries, the footage, but that was not the intention of
Right. But it's a pocket of time that's been able to be captured of a
very much.
person's
Yeah.
experience and to really show visually and verbally that someone was fully aware, cognizant, and that they are having uplifting experiences, comforting experiences in those moments. So, how about we define for them what is an end of life vision?
So
Viewers.
we call them dreams and visions. Um, the best way to describe it is it's the subjective inner um, experiences that happen at end of life. Dying, unless it's an acute death, which is rare, is progressive sleep. So you're in and out of sleep states, and you have this whole existence when your eyes closed. And so we when we call them dreams, that we don't have um, good nomenclature, accurate nomenclature for this. Because when we call them dreams, people are emphatic. They say, no, no, this actually happened. It was virtual. And we measure realism on a 1 to 10 scale. It's almost always 10. So
Mm,
it feels like it's a happening. And they'll say, I don't remember my dreams. I don't recall my dreams, etc. No, this actually was happened. So the word dream doesn't really apply.
mhm,
Visions is equally tough because a lot of times that implies their eyes were open usually, and in at least a clinical term, as a clinical term, and oftentimes they're not. We ask people whether they occur in dreaming or whether they're awake, and it's 50-50.
mm,
And we're not so sure whether they're vivid dreaming or virtual dreaming, but either way, it's a very distinctive state that's subjective, it's introspective, it's inner, and not observed. And that's what we refer to as end of life dreams and visions.
mhm, mhm. And in these instances, it could probably feel just a flash for people who are outside of the experience. But for people who are in the vision, it can be quite detailed in those moments.
Remarkably detailed. Yeah, there's some very strong characteristics across when we study these folks, and we've studied a lot of them.
What
Um,
are those characteristics that you
yeah, so what
notice?
we did was we did a couple of things is we would give standardized questionnaires. So these were all very quantified and measured. Every patient is screened whether they're confused or not. So there's ethical issues in studying people who are confused, and you don't want this to be dismissed as delirium. So these
Yeah.
are people who are cognitively intact and okay. And we ask questions, are you having these experiences? And if you ask somebody every day in the weeks before death, about 90% report at least one like event.
Mhm.
Um, then we ask them to measure comfort, and about 88% are comforting. And the discomforting ones are actually very interesting, and we can talk about those
Yes,
separately.
please.
We asked about realism, and they're
Mhm.
off the charts in terms of realism. And we asked some content. And then we measure the frequency of these events as they get closer to death. And what we find is there's a dramatic increase in the frequency as people get close to death. And then specifically, the the subject that they see the most of starts to be seeing the deceased. And what's interesting is seeing the deceased is associated with the greatest comfort. So people are progressively feel soothed as they're going towards the end of life. And there's a lot of detail there. So the people they tend to see, it's almost like editing, are very specific. They tend to be the people who love them unconditionally, who were formative in their life and their development. They tend to exclude people who weren't, so that may be one parent, not another, two siblings, not the third, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So it's a lot on this idea of unconditioned love, and very little is said between and people will comment on this again and again and again in their videos. Very little is said between the dreamer and the people in the dream. So these are not like um, what are the other experiences at the end of life, near death, where people get told a lot of stuff
Right.
and they go back, leave with all these messages. There's no, I don't, patients don't wake up from this and say, what does this mean? They know. If you lost your parent and you see your parent, you don't need anyone to translate it, which
Right.
is just because, they've already reached that point. There's no more work to do, right? And so they tend to focus on those things. Travel is common. Uh, Animals are very common. Uh, 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 you know, another theme of unconditioned love. Um, and time is less of an issue. So they remember with great clarity something from childhood, a childhood dog, for example. So they're more and more and more towards the end, they just get this sense of being put back together from
Mm. Yeah.
the things that matter in life, which is and our greatest accomplishments, which is our relationships. That
Yes.
tends to be the focus.
Oh, that's so lovely. When you think about how people can feel so lonely in a life, and we always think of death when people are ill and heading toward that, how lonely it could be. And here it is. You never, even if someone doesn't have a physical person present when they're passing, they
Yeah,
have spirit people. They have individuals that are there to comfort them, to cheer them on, to coach them through that experience energetically, just by their very loving presence.
yeah. I wrote about that during COVID because so many people were removed from their loved one at the end of life,
Yeah.
and just that people don't die alone. They
Yes.
may not be physically present, but they don't die alone.
Yeah. And it's not just an airy fairy wish for people. This is a true thing that loved ones in
Yeah, yeah,
spirit
yeah,
come through and they're there to comfort, they're there to assist. They can't necessarily change anything for people in that regard, but they can hold their hand, so to speak, while
yeah,
it's happening. And you're right. During COVID, that experience, I even have with clients when I've connected with their loved ones in spirit that died alone in a hospital or what, from the COVID experience, they weren't allowed to go and be around them when they passed. It has been so beautiful for them to feel reconnected with them in a reading and
yeah,
say, guess what? I was okay. I had so and so with me. I had,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's so even if they missed out on being present for those things. Others definitely bridge the gap.
Yeah, 100%. And and again, this is this other side of dying that we don't see that's that's very much experienced.
Yeah, I think that in terms of this, even though you and your team have been researching this for how many years now, would you say? It's
Yeah, 15
15 years.
plus.
Are you continuing a lot of the same questions, or are you deciding to add new things into it, or are there
Yeah, no,
different
very different, very different.
flavors that you're
Yeah. So
bringing it through?
what we were very interested in is what's the effect of these
Hmm.
um, experiences, and it's fascinating. And we used various measures. So there's scales, for example, called post-traumatic growth. So the idea within a change or negative experience that there's positive value. Um, and that's true of lots of things. So in war, it's the camaraderie, for example. And so what happened to these people as they were dying compared to people who weren't? And what we found was fascinating that they were growing and adapting and gaining insight from these experiences
Hmm.
right up until the last days of life, which really speaks to um, the paradox of dying, which is it's this physical lessening,
Hmm.
but spiritually and psychologically, they're actually growing and they're learning. And kind of the take home of it is you don't stop living because you're dying. And there's actually profound living within dying. And so that's kind of a whole series of questions that we asked and answered, which is that dying is not this passive, physical, empty uh, process that's defined by physical organ failure.
Yes.
It's the best way, and I think one of the problems is that we put it in such a medical rubric that we view it as organ failure and medical failure, and really it's life closure, right? And that is much more of a spiritual journey than it is a physical one. And that's what these experiences tell us, and our patients tell us.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me from a Chinese medicine viewpoint when it comes to, let's say, the beginning of life, gestation. There are different energy channels that open up in the mother to help energy come through and build and merge the flesh and the spirit together so beautifully. But then also at the end of life, there are different energetic pathways that are lighting up and also releasing and letting go during that time. And I guess there's this curious part of me that wonders if you've noticed if a person's going through the end of life visions, having these comforts, do you notice a corresponding energetic pathway that's happening with those individuals, or anything that you notice? Well, now this is starting to shut down in them, but there's this other thing that's coming forward on a spiritual energetic level or knowledge on a deeper
Yeah, I'm not
soul.
sure if I'm answering this correctly, but when we did our first study, we looked at people who were coming into our inpatient, they were close to dying. And
Yes.
so and then we're struck by how many people came in and they were already having these experiences. And dying is a process, so it became very important to look at different points along the way because it's not static.
Right.
So we went further upstream in illness and when people were at home and captured them like up to a year before death. And we did see a change in that they gradually let go, and this makes sense. They gradually let go of the things that really don't matter, you know, their bills, for example, right? And gradually they focus on their current relationships and their kind of earthbound concerns.
Hmm.
And then gradually, as they're getting closer towards the end of life, that has a way of being diluted. And they're much more tied and bound to a very select group of people again that um, that showed them love.
Yes.
And so it becomes almost immersive in a spiritual sense defined by that quality
Mm.
of love, and particularly enduring love or formative love. So, again, upbringing becomes very important. And the
Mm.
funny thing is, the person doesn't have to have been in the life for a period of for the entirety or the length. It's not defined by length of exposure, it's the potency of the exposure.
Oh,
So
yes. Yeah,
it could be
potency.
somebody from just a period in early life. And what's fascinating is the feeling that they got from that relationship is very much reinvoked.
Mm.
So it feels, I can't express it enough. It feels like it's in the now. It doesn't feel distant to them.
Can you give us a story as an example,
Yeah,
perhaps?
yeah. I was thinking of it as I was hearing myself talk. And there's a great video of this. There's a couple, and they weren't married. But they were together for a very, very long time. And he's relatively young. He's in his early 50s, I believe, and he was at the end of his life. And he he had grown up in an Italian family, and a kind of family thing was that they would that his grandmother made a spaghetti sauce, and it was highly symbolic of the family gathering, et cetera, et cetera. And he continued to make the spaghetti sauce throughout his life, and I guess it was a several-hour process. And very near the end of life, his significant other in the morning says, can I get you something to eat? And he says, no, I'm full. I ate with my grandmother uh, last night. So not only was it a recollection, he had the physical sensation of being full,
Mm.
and of course symbolized to love. And what gets very interesting is he could never figure out the ingredient that he was missing in the sauce. And he's literally 48 hours from death. And he now knows because of this experience. So he sends her out to get the ingredients, which was sugar at the end. And so I think that's a really good example of it. And somebody, and as she says in the video, this wasn't a memory. This actually happened to the point that he actually felt full again. Um, so my point is that his reality um, was far more defined than the one we shared, which is often the case. There's this unshared reality that we don't have access to. At least I don't. You may, and that and that he was immersed in it to the point that that was now his reality, and it carried with it every sense and remembrance, and that's how he left the world, was feeling full and reconnected with probably a grandmother he hadn't seen since young adulthood, childhood, maybe. So yeah.
What a great example of a gift. What a,
Yes, right.
so that he can go out on such a high note,
Yeah. Well,
that that he gets to go on this high note of I feel full, I feel complete, I feel that this great mystery of the spaghetti sauce has been solved.
yeah.
And it just shows that continuity of life and love with his grandmother, and that he'll be okay. But how
Well, he
beautiful
got
for his
literally put
wife and
back together.
partner. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what so the next, you asked about what other studies we've done.
Yes.
We've done a whole array of studies of and published them on the effects of this on bereavement, because how we see somebody leave us absolutely influences our remembrance of them and how we grieve. And so dying can be defined by its physicalness, which is grim. It can be defined in a medical context with tubes and vents and everything, or it can be described as something very completely different. And um, what we have found is that people who witness this have a very different grieving process that's measurable. There's scales for grief and how people grieve, and people do measurably, significantly better who witness this because, again, it inverts dying entirely. And really, the best example I can give you is you've got a couple who may have been together 60 plus years and they lost a child, say, at birth or infancy. And we've seen a lot of this. A lot of lost children get held again in their mother's arms at the end of life. And you're looking down at your partner and you've had this lifelong injury and emptiness from this death. And the love, their life partner's holding this child and referring to it by name. Well, that changes death from physical by its physical change from its physical parameters to love filled.
Yes.
And again, the point is that it always seems to affirm life. It doesn't. So death denies life. This seems to affirm it. So yeah,
And it's such a gift, not just for the person who is in the process of dying, but as you said, as you explained so beautifully in your story too, it's a gift that for those who are bereaved, they can look back on that and go, I know they're okay. I know
yeah.
they're okay. And I know I'm going to be okay when it's my turn. Like it does, is there a scale for that too?
Oh,
That they
oh yeah.
feel hopeful about the end of their own life when it
It's
comes?
it's funny you asked that. That's the question we want to ask next. Is
Oh, okay, good.
is absolutely go in that direction is to find out. We've done a little bit on these influencing factors, like we've tried to figure out the role of religion, and we can't seem to sort that out. That doesn't seem to
Oh, I
change.
wanted to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And so whether they believed or didn't believe in a
yeah.
divine source or believed in a certain religion, from that standpoint, it doesn't seem to have any carryover then.
No, not measurably. It's a little challenge because it's hard to get a good sense of somebody's religion. Let's say they'll check off that they're Catholic, but they may have been raised but let go of the church,
True,
60 years
true.
ago. Yeah, and there's a great um, article. It, we struggled with this a lot because it's hard to hear if you're um, if you're formally religious. Um, but then the argument becomes this, which is that it's absolutely consistent with the tenets of faith, which is love and forgiveness. And
Yes.
there's a beautiful piece written by um, uh, uh, a theologian named Kerr, and her point is that people don't live theology in their heads, and that people at the end of the life seldom talk in terms of religion. And the idea is that to know God is to know love, and that the first and last classroom of love is our family, and that's where they go to,
Yes.
and that's entirely congruent, consistent with religious teaching. It's not in opposition to it. So
And it's beautiful to know that whatever connections the bond and rapport of love that we have with people when they're here, that does carry into the next. And I've also seen through my own sessions, my own life with clients too, that they can build a strong rapport with someone who maybe they didn't like very much when they were in the living. But now, because they've had the spirit communication and they can see the involvement and the change and the experience of them as version 2.0 is what I like to call it, that shifts their understanding of their father, their mother, whoever it was
yeah,
in spirit that wasn't very nice, but then they have a new understanding of things. And
yeah,
then sometimes those are the people that are able to welcome them to the other side because they've built up this incredible bond with
right,
them.
right.
So I don't want people to think they can't shift certain relationships because there can be apologies, there can be that aspect of it. And I'd love to see research on that too. I know I
Yeah,
can't make requests. But that
I'm
was
sure you can.
so cool just to see, yeah, once somebody has seen someone else go through an end of life vision, are they more likely to have end of life visions too? Like, is there in their
Yeah,
mind?
we looked at that question is whether
Okay.
belief systems influenced your the likelihood. And there's some indication that there is, but it's not necessarily determinant. So this seems
So
to just come to people.
let's say you're asking you or a younger staff are asking them, have you had any visions today? Just by asking, would that prompt person to maybe
No, I mean
accept?
that's one of the questions. Are you suggesting it? Suggesting it?
Right, right.
And no, what tends to happen is that there's people you walk into and they just tell you straight up, you're not going to believe what happened last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But part of our job is to create a permissive structure for people to acknowledge not just these things, but let's say anxiety. And you
Sure.
have a man who may not want to say, I'm anxious. So
Hmm.
it becomes very important is to lay the groundwork by normalizing things, right?
Yeah.
So, listen, you know, dying involves a lot of change in sleep. You're going to be in and out of very deep sleep. It's very common for people to have very vivid virtual like dream like experiences. Is this something that you're experiencing? Oh gosh, yes. So that's how these things
That's how
kind
that
of
comes about.
rise to surface. Yeah, it's funny. The other people, I just saw a woman a couple of weeks ago who often what happens is if they've lived long enough, they've been witnessed or heard of it within a family, let's say.
Right. There you go.
So she was very receptive. And this is a deeply religious woman who went on and on and on about all the experience she's having with her deceased husband. And yeah, to the point it's funny. He was obsessed with getting squirrels off of his porch. And so then she sees herself um, uh, uh, seeing it as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, because sometimes the people in spirit will uh, convey aspects that were important to them, the
Yes.
things that they were maybe obsessive about, like the squirrels in the case of that husband.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden they may find that to be something that they do on a habit level too. And it's
Yes.
because they're blending so significantly with that spirit communicator, that loved
Yes.
one from the other side that starts to
Very much.
uh where there's a you almost don't know where one person begins and the other ends in those
Yeah,
scenarios.
and that's actually really interesting. I think that's fascinating. And
It
you
is.
see it across lives too, right? Because you'll see a mother and she's seen her mother and the granddaughters there. And there's this connectivity across lives, whether they're living or dead, because
Yes.
there's this thread of love and familiarity that just seems to come to surface.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask, as much as those individuals have their end of life visions, there are such thing as shared end of life visions, right? Where a loved one that's in the living next to their person who is passing is also sharing in the moment on
Yeah.
on a spirit communication level or on a vision level. Can you talk to that briefly too?
No, I'm the least qualified. And
Look at you, Mister. I've done all this.
yeah, no, I haven't had that experience. But I was talking to somebody this morning from Canada
Mhm.
who got into this work for that reason. And there's a guy I know named William Peters who does the Shared Crossing project, and he documents these things.
Okay.
And I don't know what I may be the issue. Maybe I'm closed-minded. I just don't hear of it. But yeah, no, people, I mean, obviously you hear of it. I just don't see it clinically. But I think also I'm involved in a very difficult moment, right? I'm involved in the whole event of the death.
Mhm.
So it's not really that time to reflect. And maybe if you spoke to them afterwards, you'd hear.
Sure.
So it just may be my exposure, but yeah, no, you certainly, yeah, you hear of it,
And
certainly.
so it'd be more of an outtake research after.
Yeah, exactly. You're
Yeah.
loading me with ideas today.
So then, in terms of this, uh, in people wanting to participate in this, and you said that it starts to really amplify in people, and some people can have one vision, but people can have more than one end of life vision
Yeah.
that's occurring. Have you noticed why that would be? Why certain people would get a whole bunch versus others just get one? Or have you noticed anything about
I
that?
think that may be on us because what happens is people fall out of our study for
Oh,
difficulty communication, for example, or they become
sure.
confused. I
Right.
think that, and actually, I think it's unfortunate because I think some of the people who are also delirious or confused are having very intense experiences, but we
Hmm.
just can't document them. I think
Right.
most people are, they're not singular events, but they're a storm of events. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And um, in terms of creating this, as I said, that compassionate roadmap that you're trying to build for other care professionals who maybe aren't necessarily at Hospice Buffalo, but in other
Yeah.
locations, what is it that you would like them to have as the big takeaway? You have all this research, you have this evidence, you've done all of that. What is your takeaway for those folks?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the roots of this work is basically, in the importance of demedicalizing the dying process. And the patient who's dying of liver failure doesn't feel differently from the person with kidney failure. They have their experience, and it has nothing to do with a medical framework, and that it really is life closure, and that um, the requirements of care go far beyond, and it doesn't belong into the domain of medicine. It's far more of a spiritual journey, and um, dying can be very lonely. And I worry we run the risk of making it more lonely if we don't acknowledge that there's an experience that we don't understand, but
Mhm.
but is terribly valid to the person who's living it. And that, you know, even if you're discomforted, unquieted, unfamiliar, but it becomes important to have reverence for the fact that this is profoundly everything to that individual. And so to acknowledge and to be open to it, to validate the experience, not to refute it,
Mhm.
um, and to create space for it. Uh, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. And just that it is what it is for that individual.
I love the way that you express this because it's not what you consider the normal way of a medical professional, right? That you, at least twice so far, you've used the word reference toward the beginning of this interview and now, and I think that that's such an important part of what you and your team and hopefully others as they proceed with this, that they bring that recognition of the reverence in that moment. That
Yeah,
sometimes
and
there's
that
this temptation to just let a person be quiet and die. Yes, we have to honor, as it were. But there's this other part of of maybe just listening to them. Is there
yeah,
the healing aspect of by them telling a living person about that end of life vision? What is the healing component that you see for that dying individual?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the idea of presence, and it's very interesting. We do these studies that everybody wants to participate, and they want to participate because they want to be heard,
There you go.
and they're not looking for gain. They're never going to see the outcome of it. For example, when they participate in filming, they still want to connect. And that desire to be humanized and seen doesn't go away because they're dying. We have this tendency to sterilize the dying. That's probably the worst thing we can do. Um, just make it empty.
Yeah. And so just to give people even more of the framework of how this is done, who who is the research team? Is that considered the people who work at Buffalo? Are they all part of that, or just particular people that are interviewing with them and capturing on video?
Most of it is our research team,
Okay.
but it also includes our clinicians who work here.
Hmm.
And then we have other collaborators, for example, in Brazil that do this work for us. But yeah, when we're doing a study, it tends to be
Yes.
the research team, and they come
Good.
from all different backgrounds of psychology or sociology or
Do some of them say, yes, pick me, I want to be on the research team for this?
yeah, we call it the dream team. And some people,
Oh,
and what's really funny is that
death is but a dream team.
exactly is that who
Oh,
shares these stories with the staff is interesting. So for a long time, our probably our biggest referral of patients was one of the aides
mm.
who just had a clinical manner that was open and comforting and people shared. So yeah. So
Well, I think it is. It's who you resonate, who you feel safe in sharing your story with, because that would be a
yeah.
big component
Yeah,
of that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And being able to be very vulnerable in those moments and
Yeah,
and share something that is the most unguarded experience they can have at that time.
absolutely. And that
And
comes to kind of a some kind of clinical sense, but again, it can be the priest, it can be the social worker. It's more the right person, not the discipline.
there you go. Oh, I love that you just said it's the right person to bear witness to them about
Yeah.
this. Now, are there any other points of research that your team is working on right now that you'd like to share with folks?
I think we'd have some more data on um, dreams that bereaved people have about the loved ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and those
And
are very interesting. There's some very common themes to those that we'll discuss during the talk.
okay, yeah. So when you're here on June 20th
Yeah,
in Lily Dale, he's going to share with us
yeah,
about that, about the bereaved, because they do have dreams. And I just as a point of information for folks, because I get this question more than I thought I would ever get. People ask, well, I've heard that the individual and spirit can't cross unless someone's had a dream about them. I said, no, it is not dependent on your ability to dream about them
no,
for them to pass. It's
don't
more,
think I don't think there's rules.
like this. It's so funny how people get really concerned about these things,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's a, it is a real concern people have expressed to me.
yeah,
But when you have a spirit visitation in a dream, it is comforting. It's loving. There's
yeah,
none of the other kind of emotional, triggery, psychological, psychobabble dreaming that's
no,
associated with that. There's a sweetness and purity, and of course, it's just like them to
yes,
come forward
exactly.
in certain ways that are uniquely their personality and their essence, and how beautiful that essence of the spirit communicator is able to convey in dreams to
Yeah,
their loved ones in the
really
living. Oh, I'm
well
glad
said.
you're doing that study. That's going to be a good one
Yeah,
too. And any last things you'd like to share with people about that
no,
healing
just I
power?
look forward to seeing folks. When I arrive, the talk will include actually a lot of videos of patients and families and staff, so you'll get a good sense of all that.
Yeah, so it'll be good that's been all edited and curated so that people can
Yeah,
really see
yeah.
the array of healing experiences that these end of life visions
Yeah, and
have given others.
I can't do it justice. It's better to hear from them themselves.
Right. That's the thing, having someone put it into their own words.
Yeah,
But
it's everything. It's
well,
everything.
thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
their mouthpiece in some ways, because you're pretty much the only way people can access this other than seeing them in documentaries
Yeah,
and see the powerful effect and that healing power of end of life visions. And please, I speak for a lot of people. Keep going with your research
Thank
and
you.
your team. We're so grateful for what you are able to bring to light that many of us already know, but
Yeah, I know.
it's just it's just delightful that uh, now see we got proof.
Yeah,
So
no, I know I'm preaching to the choir. Well,
that's right.
thank you
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
me.
We appreciate, and please, everyone, click the link in the post description here so you can get your ticket to join Dr. Christopher Kerr on June 20th here in Lilydale. He'll be here opening day of the Lilydale 2025 season, and we'd be glad to have you visit that evening. It's from 7 to 9 in the big auditorium, so there'll be plenty of space for y'all to learn and to see the videos that Dr. Christopher Kerr is going to share with us. Thank you, everyone, for being
Thank
here
you.
today. And I'll please tune in next week. And thank you so much for being here today,
Thank
Chris.
you, Willa, very much.
Bye.